We are finally here, my fellow going medieval fans, at the Lord of the Rings inspired underground settlement with some particularly well designed ruins topside. As I teased in the previous player construction showcase, we are going to be taking a deep look, pun intended, at this truly marvelous fantasy build by SirHundemand, which he called Erebor. With the save file he sent me, I also got some info about his inspiration for the settlement, which primarily came from Moria, known also as Khazad-dûm, and obviously Erebor, which for any of you unfamiliar with Lord of the Rings lore is the subterranean dwarven city located north of Dale and prominently pictured in the Hobbit movies. Of course, I will showcase a few other settlements as well, and if you would like me to make a video about your settlements, send me the save file to the email in the description down below, where you will also find links to my many guides and let's plays of going medieval. Now, where does one start with this kind of a settlement? I must admit it's been quite difficult to plan the showcase because of the nature of the underground settlement and its many layers. The hardest part is showcasing the rooms whose floors are 5 or more levels below their roofs and supported by massive pillars and arches. In the end, I decided on first giving you a look layer by layer so you can get a better sense of the whole settlement, which is spread inside this mountainside and even on top of it. Of course, we will also visit the masterfully crafted ruins and a mock-up of a river, which even includes a mini fishing village. The inspiration gained from SirHundamand's save for designing not just settlements but also the terrain around them is simply priceless, and I want to thank him very much for sharing it with us. Now let's start our overview with the most notable terrain features, both natural and constructed. Going along this wide road, we pass the ruins on the right as well as the fishing village and go through the few arches until we reach the main gates and fortifications. Across from these we have a huge stockpile of dug up materials obviously waiting to be worked into the settlement proper. The second road leading to the entrance from the other part of the map passes between an apple orchard and a fenced off herb garden, which I think is a beautiful touch. That second road also has arches as well and starts like the first one at a probable spawn location for merchants. On the side of this mountain there is a man-made feature which is just beautiful to watch. It looks like a side gate entrance which can double for a water spillway as it isn't really connected to the inside of the settlement. Some of its half-built features also remind of a broken down ancient bridge which spans a small dry riverbed. If we follow the natural lines here, we come down to a canyon dug down to granite bedrock and its color is used as a stand-in for actual river water. This is why a small wooden bridge is here, adding to the fantasy, as well as the other much more massive limestone one. The biggest make-believe moment comes when you finally get to the fishing village, complete with a dock, stool for sitting and fishing, a cottage with a chimney and a fireplace, and even some fences so settlers don't fall into the river. The simple life of a local fisherman isn't complicated, so neither is their home. The river continues through the mountainside and even goes underground, or it is its source and it flows towards the settlement. It's a fantasy, so it works whichever version you choose to believe. Another big landmark on the outside and above ground of the settlement is the old ruined castle we passed on the main road. It has been built with utmost care by this player to give off that perfect blend of age and destruction. Its towers are half broken and even the doors are half open, allowing us to enter and then drop and break our legs through the many holes in its floors. I love its addition to the environment and I think more players should build such things across their maps to add extra character to their settlements. It really helps sell the whole idea about people living across this land. An interesting thing about its bottom is that if you imagine the iron nugget piles as lava and iron-rich vein a lava flow, you can get a picture straight out of the fantasy movies in your head about this whole ancient castle which slowly cooks in the heat of a bubbling lava. Now, above it all and at the top of the mountain is where we actually find a barn of sorts for skeps, an apple orchard, and even some free-range game. Those settlers who work here on honey and wax production don't seem to mind the wolf prowling between the piles of hay and neither does the deer. This will of course change in the next game update with prey and predators, but I will talk about that in a future video. Besides the orchard and skep on top of the mountain, there are also red currant shrubs as well as barley, flax, carrots, cabbage, beets and herbs, and most notably, they are on crop fields dug into different levels. One of these even has a cartoon favorite scene happening right on it, a bunny or hare picking at growing carrots. What's up, Doc? The little fort-like structure on the edge of the cliff is actually just a tower protecting the staircase which leads down into the settlement proper. Funnily enough, even deers use this passage, which turns into an actual tower in an otherwise dug out cavern. This is why I said in the intro, it is going to be hard to show you the settlement and its many layers. Looking from on top, there are 4 different levels your eye depth perception is going to be lost in. If the floors had been made from different materials, it would have been a bit easier to distinguish them, but as they are all out of limestone blocks, it is quite hard to do so. The bottom part of this tower/staircase is a single bedroom with a terrace and even a pet wolf stuck on it, as it seems. There is probably a funny story behind that, and hopefully SirHundemand will tell us in the comments, where I invite you to leave your own questions for him. On the bottom level of this cavern, we find several workshops with individual rooms filled with stockpiles or shelves for materials and finished products, which is exactly what I noted was lacking in the previous settlement I showcased in episode 9, link up there if you missed it. There are also small bedrooms and mini religious chapels, and this fantastically designed niche in the wall filled with a brazier and topped with an arch. This might look an insignificant detail, but it adds so much character to the overall build. Moving to the edge of the settlement, there is a doorway which leads to another dugout section and a tunnel that keeps going and even forking into several other ones. This is where mining for new resources happens, and I instantly start hearing Saruman's voice saying the dwarves dug too greedily and too deep. Anyway, back to the lowest level of the settlement for a look at the gold and silver stockpiles, which are just a fraction of what can be found throughout the underground rooms. Next up, I want to give you a close-up of the many different rooms used for rest and work, which are lined up next to the walls of this level. Each one of these is decorated at least a bit with added details in front and even windows, which actually remind me of shops in Ironforge, the hometown of dwarves in World of Warcraft. We can see an armor smith hard at work here and a banner in front of the doors acting like a store sign, with even an armor rack and shield ornament to make the full store role-playing effect. At the end of the line of shops, we find a very large and still unused crypt, which has a particularly interesting roof. Limestone block arches span natural rock pillars from which hang additional pillars off the sides. I must admit, this is the first time I have ever seen such a configuration, and it is just one more unique aspect of this build. Do note that structural stability is a key aspect and a gameplay mechanic which is behind a construction project like this one. Without understanding what keeps a pillar stuck to another like this, you won't be able to build such settlements yourselves, and that is why I made a specific guide on this subject, link up here and below. Another room type at this lowest level are these food basements filled with raw food set on shelves and chilled by several ice blocks. Not far from it is the brewery and a big dining room, the former filled with half a dozen workstations, a table to taste the latest brews at, with a distilling workstation for alcohol. The roof has the same design we saw used in the crypt. Next door is another, much more complicated food basement with many separate rooms, pillars and arches also holding just raw food. This one is far less space efficient than the previous one we looked at. That design is shared by this third food basement over here, with a path in the middle that is wider than strictly necessary. One level up is a host of simple and quite space efficient seed vaults with some herbs and medicine. On the edge of the settlement, we have 2 quite roomy religious buildings. These are actually accessed by traveling many levels down a huge shaft of the main entrance hall. I will show it off in its entirety a bit later. The church and temple have a distinct structural design, and both are built the same, but they are furnished in a different manner, one with stone and the other with wooden stools, and the floors have individual patterns. Again we see that walled-in and arched brazier nook in the walls. If you thought we were done with visiting food basements, think again, as this massive space is dedicated to more raw food and pickled vegetable storage. I know dwarves have a healthy appetite, but come on, even they could not possibly eat all this food at Erebor. Or could they? In any event, this is where we finally run into some cooked foods on the level above, but it too holds some more raw ingredients as well as stimulants. Here we have a well-located great hall for eating right across the kitchens, and all around it are bedrooms for that nice midday nap after a hearty meal. Do notice how braziers are incorporated into all rooms as a hole in the wall, and the same is used for the great hall. Its stability is provided by some extra pillars and arches in the middle, standing just over the chairs at the table, a design I don't think I have had the pleasure of showing you before. For good measure, behind the many bedrooms there is another set of religious shrines, and I honestly approve of this, as settlers shouldn't have to spend a lot of time looking for the nearest place to worship their gods. It really helps the overall efficiency of a settlement for them to have these dotted around a big settlement like this one. The less time they spend in transit, the more they can work. This is something I have talked about many times in my guides on Going Medieval, and I think you would especially find the village design guide useful in choosing how and where to start your next construction projects. Now to take a closer look at the most characteristic and memorable part of this underground design, the entrance gates and the grand attached hall. I think it's best to once again start from the outside, especially because I can show you an amazing engineering feat achieved here. Not only are the battlements and defenses dug into the mountainside on almost 10 different levels, but the open windows on one of the highest ones actually give you a direct view into the throne or audience chamber all the way at the back of the grand hall. You can see just how perfectly this has been aligned, and I can only imagine how hard it must have been to pull off. If we walk in through the front doors, we can go on a direct path to the king's seat. Here is the full view of the tall pillars holding up the mountain and preventing it from collapsing into this grand hall. They are perfectly spaced out and one on top of the other because stability has to be transferred vertically without any horizontal shift, as I learned the hard way during my many Let's Plays, and in one of which I also built an underground village. All the decorations, changes of pillar visual design and use of new arches from update 3 really gives the spacious room a spectacular look. Before I move on to the rest of this Lord of the Rings inspired settlement, let me show you what other players have constructed. And while you enjoy these screenshots, I will tell you that making this video took 8,999 clicks, and I hope you won't mind spending a few clicks of your own on those thumbs up and subscribe buttons below the video, because I would really appreciate you supporting me and my channel. Of these other settlements, I think the Dwarven Fortress by Ebonhold from Reddit fits perfectly with this video showcase because it features the very same idea, just executed differently. The main causeway leads up to a much smaller and less ornate front wall-like entrance, behind which is a really well organized and compact underground settlement. Its bottom level holds the merchant stalls and caravan stops at the entrance proper, beyond which is a rather roomy great hall with an included cartography table, so it has a dual use as a dining and a war room. The food and stimulants production is in this corner with a very tight storeroom for cooked food, with a masterfully designed, open-roofed, multi-level room for meat smoking and skeps, as these workbenches don't work underground. The other corner is predominantly material storage, while the other two corners hold bedrooms and a chest storeroom on one end and a library on the other. That library is actually spread to the second level as well, with an open floor in the middle, something I particularly like. Next to it is the storeroom for clothing, while most other rooms span this level as well, except the material storage one, above which there is a workshop for block production from clay and limestone. The screenshots of this level also reveal the raised dais with the chairs for the presumed king and queen, something a lot of players have been adding lately. The top level holds a host of different rooms. The mini chapels to different religions are inside the walls and quite far apart, while the main single bedrooms take up the middle. A few more of them are on the left corner together with a distilling and an apothecary workbench, which makes for a well-designed mini medicine workshop. Opposite to these is a big forge with everything from blacksmithing and armorsmithing workbenches to furnaces and empty armor racks ready for fresh suits of armor to be hung. The materials are also stored here, which is always a good idea. Between the wood weapon workshops and this forge is another storeroom, and this one dedicated to weapons and armor. At the very edge of the last room is a sewing station with all the accompanying materials. And that wraps up this Dwarven fortress by Ebonhold. I wanted to spend some more time on these other beautiful settlements as well, especially Hearted Pool by Vrit21, because it's the polar opposite of Erebor, but that would make this into a really long video, so I will leave them for the next one, as it's high time I return to Erebor itself. These rooms here look like they are still in construction because it's a strange place to store raw limestone. A level above is the entrance to the audience chamber throne room, where we find a single merchant stall and a caravan halt. I haven't said it before, but I do love the settlement's heraldry because it has that royal look to it. Funny thing about this audience with the king and the open floor is that you might find yourself in one of those "This is Sparta" moments. This level features many mini kitchens and food basements, as well as a blacksmith workshop and a dining hall. This is also a place where a lot of material refining takes place, and we can see settlers hard at work right now making gold and silver bars. Next room is a mirror image just with different materials queued up for smelting. One thing I have not mentioned is the fact that game tables are spread around the underground at many locations and levels, which is totally fine since they do not require a specific place to be played and give settlers their leisure satisfaction. On the same level, but on the other side of the settlement, more rooms can be found as bedrooms, religious ones, kitchens, and food storage. Now, some of you might start thinking, who needs 5 kitchens? But as I said about the dining rooms, bedrooms, and chapels, when you have a huge settlement, it is much better to decentralize all activities and professions. That way, settlers can get back to their scheduled activities instantly instead of wasting time searching for their workstation or a place to enjoy leisure activities. One of the really cool role-playing rooms is this library room with the checkerboard floor tiles, a cartography table, bookshelves, and even suits of armor on racks. It just gives off a marvelous fantasy look in the context of this Lothera-inspired settlement. Below this section are several small storerooms holding materials and finished goods of all kinds. This is where another stockpile of gold and silver is also located. On the floor above the library is an apothecary workshop, and a level above that is an open mess hall of sorts with a local larder filled with tasty and chilled meals. It is across this room that we finally find the proper main library with research tables and even a settler hard at work there. I love the design choice of leaving natural pillars in and stacking them full of bookshelves. It gives this place that special and unique look everyone should strive for when making specialized rooms. Moving a bit away and a level up, I want to also show you the royal bedchambers with the double bed and minimal ornamentation, which I would say is clean and tasteful. Because of the specific way this settlement has been dug out and built underground, some rooms I have skipped over, like this armory next to the entrance, with both weapons and armor at the ready. There is also a great hall with a massive double table and 20 plus chairs, as well as numerous other small rooms which hold gear, individual bedrooms or food stores. The whole settlement is like a proper Dwarven underground city with crisscrossing 3-dimensional rooms, staircases and pathways. I wish I had the ability to walk through it and look through the eyes of a single settler, as that would finally do justice to this amazing place. Although there is one set of eyes I would prefer never to look through. His eyes. How in the world this happened and how did I manage to pause the game at this exact moment is just the secret of the universe. But there it is. And on the subject of settlers, I want to show you two more things. First is the history screen, which tells us that this game was played on the peaceful mode for 20 hours, spanning almost 600 in-game days, with the maximum settler count reaching 18. The map type is mountain, as you would expect, and the difficulty is easy. Map seed is there for you if you want to play here for yourself. Second thing I wanted to let you experience is how this settlement functions and to give you a taste of the settlers' day-to-day lives. Here too, the camera is simply unable to let you experience the whole thing at once, but I hope that with some live layer changes, you're getting a better picture. I keep getting amazed by what you, the players of Going Medieval, can come up with and actually build inside this game, and that with the limited square form of building sections. I can't even imagine what the next mind-blowing build is going to be like, but I hope you will be here to experience it with me. If you have one such settlement save already, do send it to me using the email in the description so I can showcase it and share it with the whole community. Thank you for watching and happy gaming!